Hello, my name's Jarrett Thomas and I'll be your instructor, and this is Old Testament Survey. And in this class we're going to go over the Old Testament of the Bible, and this isn't really a class about what is exactly right and what is exactly wrong, but more of what does the Bible say, more of the culture and what was going on at the time, the political atmosphere of the ancient culture, and how it is applied in churches today. So we will get into some of those discussions. But this class is a very basic class. I assume you know nothing coming into the class. That's why it's a survey class. That's why it's a lower level class. But in this, hopefully by the end, you will have learned the Old Testament basics and why the Bible was put together the way that it was. And so as we start, there's going to be discussion boards in this class. You need to have the discussion boards done on time. And with that, I want you to critically think, and I want you to talk and interact with the other students in the class. But with that, we got to be respectful. This can be a touchy subject for a lot of people. Me, I'm actually a pastor of a church in Cross City, Florida, and so you'll know right off the bat I do believe in all of this, and I will give you my viewpoint, but I'll also try to give you the viewpoints of different denominations within Christianity, and also what some of the non-believers will say, how this came about, and things like that. So we'll go over some of the history of the Bible and how it was put together. So before we start into the actual Bible, we're going to talk about types of Bible. There are so many types of Bibles, and there are so many versions that you can buy or that you can get online. As far as this class is concerned, you can use whatever you would like, but I would stay away from one type of Bible that I'll talk about in just a minute. That we'll start off with, but just about any version will work. The only one that I would suggest that you stay away is the first type of Bible we're going to talk about, which is the paragraph style Bible. I'm sorry, not paragraph, but paraphrase Bible. The paraphrase Bibles, that would be like the Message. And what the Message does is it takes an entire chapter of the Bible, so let's say Genesis chapter 1, and it breaks it down into one or two sentences. Now, this Bible was actually made for small children and people with reading disabilities. So within that context, it's a great Bible for kids that are just learning or people that have severe reading disabilities. But as far as this class is concerned, the problem with the paraphrase Bible is you lose so much theology within it. Like I said, it'll take an entire chapter. We're talking 30 sentences and break it down to 2. And you just lose too much by doing that. So I would suggest that you stay away from the Message in our readings and in the study. So the first type of Bible is the paraphrase Bible. And like it sounds like, it paraphrases the chapters and verses. The next type is the thought for thought Bible. Now this would be like your NIV, those type of Bibles. A thought for thought Bible, what it will do is it will actually take a sentence and it will then translate it into an English sentence that makes sense. So what they will do is they'll say, all right, this is what the author meant. So it'll take, in the Old Testament, the Bible was written in Hebrew, in the New Testament it's in Greek. So they'll take, in the Old Testament, a Hebrew sentence, which if you study Hebrew is one of the worst written languages ever. There's no vowels, there's no capital letters, they read from right to left instead of left to right like we read. There aren't spaces between the words, so it's very difficult language to decipher. But what they'll do is they'll take a sentence and they'll say, all right, here's what he meant, and then they will write it in a modern English sentence. The pro of that is the fact if you translate word for word in Hebrew, so you take the Hebrew word and then you say, here is the best English word we have translated. The problem is you'll have a choppy sentence. So sometimes the syntax in Hebrew is different than in English. And so sometimes when you're reading the word for word translations, it will be quite choppy. So The NIV is a good version as far as it will take a verse and say, all right, here's what the author meant. Here's the best way to put it into a modern English sentence. The con with that is someone is actually interpreting the Bible for you. So if you want to be the one to interpret the Bible, honestly, if you want to know the best way to read the Bible is to learn Greek and Hebrew and get you some of the oldest copies that we have. Now, we do not have an original text of the Bible, so we don't have any original letter that any author in the Bible wrote. All we have is copies. So the thought for thought would be the NIV Bible. And that's what I often use in teaching. I think it's the easiest to understand, but it is true you lose a little bit, which you're always going to lose some anytime you translate from one language to another. That's just the nature of language. When I was in seminary, going from a master's degree in the Bible, I remember we had a lot of people from South Korea. And they had translators with them. They had these little things that they would type in a word if they did not know what it meant. And I remember the professor one day saying, don't act all willy-nilly about that. Well, I mean, what would be a good word to use for willy-nilly? So all these South Koreans were typing in willy-nilly in their translator, and I don't know what it came up with, but I'm sure it wasn't a good translation. Some things just don't translate very well from one language to another. So, the thought for thought are good. You get the basic understanding. You don't lose a lot of theology, but you do lose a little bit, and someone is interpreting that sentence. And the last type of Bible that we'll talk about is the word-for-word translation. These take the Greek word or the Hebrew word and say, here's the best English word that you have for that. That would be the King James Version, which is probably the most popular. It was written in 1611. A lot of the more conservative churches will definitely have King James Bibles, King James Version Bibles in their churches. Then there's the New King James, the NAS, the ESV. NAS is and ESV are great versions. King James, and I said with the problem with the word for word is it's kind of choppy, but King James has a whole different element. It was written in 1611. And the difficulty with the King James version of the Bible is we don't speak that way anymore. So you'll find out in the book of Psalms, if you're reading in a King James Bible, that God saved David from the unicorn. Well, I mean, you know, you give that to someone today and they read about the unicorn, they're thinking of a horse with one horn coming out of it. But it was actually talking about a wild ox. And there are other parts where it's just tough to translate because we don't speak that way. It's not that it's wrong or it's a bad translation. It's just we don't speak that way. So that makes it difficult, especially for people who did not grow up in church and did not grow up with the King James Version of the Bible. But as I said, word for word are great for study. Like I said, word for word, it's translating it directly. But you can go online and you can use a lot of tools and you can see what the original Hebrew word says and the definition for that Hebrew word, and so that you can translate it and you can start really diving in and studying it.